Hello and welcome to Plant Crafted Pantry. Today we are recapping my first year of canning. Around the fall of 2022, I started getting recommended canning videos on YouTube and saw people that were using electric pressure canners. After doing a bunch of research, I bought the Nesco Smart Canner in January of 2023, and I have been very happy with it. I think it is less intimidating to start pressure canning with the electric canner, and since this one also doubles as a pressure cooker, I've gotten a ton of use out of it in the past year. I downloaded the canning guidelines from the National Center for Home Food Preservation, which is a free PDF on their website. I'll include the link in the description box below. This includes overall canning guidelines as well as tested recipes for canning different foods. It is important to me to follow tested recipes from these guidelines or reputable books to make sure that I am canning safely. I also checked out as many canning books as I could from my local library, which was a great way to try out different books and see which ones had recipes that I was interested in. These are the books that I ended up buying myself or asking for as gifts since they had recipes that I like using in them. I use this notebook as my canning journal and also take notes on other recipes here. This one has a pocket in the front, and I keep my canner manual in it. There are a lot of steps that are different for pressure canning versus water bath canning, and it can get confusing. So I refer back to the manual often to make sure I am following the correct steps. In my canning journal, I take notes on what I'm canning, the recipe I followed, the ingredients I used, the yield I got, and anything else that I want to remember from a canning session. For canning tools, I got this ball 3-piece set that has a canning funnel, a debubbler that also measures headspace, and a jar lifter. I also find that a slotted spoon and a ladle are very useful for filling jars. So if you've watched any of my canning videos, you will have seen me use these tools. Some other things I've found helpful are this jar opener, a mesh steamer basket for blanching veggies, and a large stock pot. This one is 12 quarts. For canning lids, I started out using the ones that came with my canning jars, but now that I've used those up, I have started switching over to 4 jars lids after seeing other YouTubers use them. And I do think they have a better seal rate, but I also stopped putting my new lids in the dishwasher before using them, so that could also be a factor. Now I just hand wash before using. For canning jars, I mainly use quarts, pints, and 8-ounce jars. I prefer the wide mouth in quarts and pints, and regular mouth quarts are too tall to fit in the Nesco Smart Canner anyway. I bought 2 cases each of the quarts and 8-ounce jars and 3 cases of the pints over the course of a few months as I figured out which ones I used the most, and this seems to be a good amount for me for now. I also like having these leak-proof lids to use for storage, like this jar of strawberry jam that is currently in my fridge. Another thing to mention is that the canning process takes quite a bit of time, so I have to plan ahead when I want to do a canning project. If I'm canning beans, I need to start soaking them the day before, and depending on the project, it can take a few hours or even all day for something like baked beans to prepare the ingredients to fill the jars, process them in the canner, and wait for the canner to cool down enough to remove the jars. I typically plan these projects for a weekend day and make sure I have all of the ingredients ready to go for that day. So now let's get into what I actually canned in 2023. I saved all of the lids from jars I opened throughout the year in this bowl. So let's go through and organize and count them. This doesn't include the jars that failed to seal since I didn't label those lids. So I canned 20 different items throughout the year. I'll show the numbers on the screen as I walk through each item. First up is beans. By far, the thing I canned the most this year was chickpeas, with 31 total jars, and I restocked these toward the end of the year, so I still have 8 of those jars on my pantry shelf. These always turn out great for me, and I like using the aquafaba or liquid from the jar for vegan recipes, so this is something that I will continue to can a lot of. I canned 13 jars of black beans, and again, this is something that I will continue to can. And then I canned baked beans a couple of different ways, and I really like the recipe that I shared on this channel. It took me an entire day to can them, so it's probably not something that I will do very often, but I will make them again. The 2 cans of navy beans were extra beans from a different baked bean recipe that I didn't make enough sauce for, so I'm not planning to can plain navy beans again in the future. Next are veggies and soups. Potatoes were one of the things that made me want to start canning since I don't have a good way to store fresh potatoes, and so I did end up canning a lot of them, 19 quarts. I've canned both Yukon Gold and red potatoes, and I much prefer the red potatoes, so that is what I'll continue to can in the future. I haven't heard great things about canned russet potatoes, so I didn't try those, but let me know if you have and how they turned out. I did a few cans of vegan cheese starter, which is just potatoes and carrots, and that was nice to have. As you can see, I used up all of those jars. So I will do that again this year, probably in the 1 cup size, since that was the right amount for things like a pot of macaroni and cheese. I canned 8 quarts of butternut squash, which I really enjoy and will continue to can. And then for soups, I canned 6 quarts of corn chowder starter and 8 quarts of chili, both of which I will continue to can. For fruit, I canned some homemade apple cider, which I made from Fiji apples. It turned out really good, but it took quite a bit of time, and I'm not sure it's worth making over just buying apple cider. I made the grape drink to use up some grapes before going out of town, and this was a fail for me. It's too sweet for the amount of grape flavor, so it wasn't very good diluted more or added to sparkling water. I still have 1 can left, so let me know if you have any ideas for how to use it up. The cranberry juice is great. I made that when I bought too many cranberries for the sauce, and it was pretty easy, so I might make that again. I really like the homemade cranberry sauce, so I will definitely continue to can that in the future. And the pear caramel is a big hit, and I will for sure be making that again. And I do enjoy the strawberry jam, but I am going to tweak the process next time I make it since I ended up with apple chunks in this batch. And the last section is relishes and tomatoes. I really enjoy the red onion relish, and I'm planning to make more of that soon. The pickle relish is good, but I haven't been going through it very fast, so I might need to go down to 4-ounce jars for that in the future. The bread and butter pickles are very good, and I'm down to my last jar, so I will be making those again soon and will film it for you. I wasn't planning on canning tomatoes, but my mom gave me a bunch of extra tomatoes from her garden, so I ended up doing crushed tomatoes and some roasted marinara sauce. The crushed tomatoes seemed like the easiest way to can tomatoes without a food mill, so that is what I did first, and I've only used 1 jar so far. The roasted marinara sauce was more of a process and very messy, but it turned out really well, so that is probably what I will do with tomatoes in the future. It would definitely be easier with a food mill, so I may consider getting one in the future if I have space to store it. So that is everything I canned in my first year of canning. I have really enjoyed learning this process and sharing it with all of you. I will link my canning playlist down below so you can catch up on any of those videos that you haven't seen yet. And please subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any canning videos in the future. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.